Welcome to episode 170 of the Daniel Yoris Podcast with today's guest, Shawn Rivers. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by Shawn Rivers, no stranger to podcasting. We did an episode not too long ago on Shawn's podcast, but Shawn, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you having me, and yeah, I'm pumped to have a conversation today. So
let's do it. How's your day going so far?
So far, so good. It's only 10 here, so lots of work to get to, but slow morning. It's nice and rainy here, so yeah, makes you not want to work, but you do it anyways. You know,
nice and rainy is not a phrase that you hear often. Is that no. Do you genuinely mean that, or is that a way to like? Do you convince yourself that like it's raining, but it's still nice and it's not fine, or is that just a
I mean, I would prefer to have it just pure sunshine.
Yeah.
But when it's gonna rain, I mean, I'm not controlling the weather, so it you know, you make it nice and cozy in the house. You light a candle and you can get to it. You know, so I love to go outside when it's raining and get my feet in the grass for maybe 5 minutes or so. Anything more than that, since it's raining, no thank you. So, but yeah, I like a rainy day, but as long as it's not an every week occurrence.
Yeah, fair enough. You know, my kind of guy, getting your feet in the grass. I mean,
yeah.
There's definitely something to be said about not letting uncontrollable external circumstances or situations or whatever have too much of an impact on us. And like trying to flip that switch to like, hey, this can be positive. I remember I read a story or saw a post about something a while ago where there was a father and had a child, and you know, when it was raining, he would take the kid out and they would always go play in the puddles and, you know, put on rain gear and stuff and go play outside. And the purpose of him doing that was so that his kid, I don't remember if it was a son or daughter, but the kid didn't associate rain with like negativity. The way the rest of us kind of, you know, most of us grow up saying that, oh, it's raining, so you can't go play outside. It's raining, so we can't do this. And it's like, well, yeah, you could go do all those things. You might get a little bit wet, but you know, a little bit wet is not gonna hurt you. So I like that. I like that idea. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, I think a lot of it. You know, I'm a huge component of just like getting steps as movement, right? I think you're the same way. Walking, best exercise. Even when it's raining, as long as it's not downpouring, I'll go and do some steps outside. You know, I'll go and take 10, 15, 20 minutes that way at least, because you always feel better when you get outside. That's it. You know,
that's it. Yeah, we can try and like argue that, and people can, you know, but I don't think really anyone, you know, no one's ever been like, hey, I just went for a walk outside, I feel so much worse. You know, no one's ever said that before. So you will always feel better by going outside, even if it's rainy, and, you know, wear a jacket. And even if you get wet, if you don't wear a jacket, go outside, you know, in shorts and a t-shirt, like you'll be fine. You're going to be okay. This is one of the things, like where I live, it gets pretty cold in the winter. It's like, oh, it's cold outside, so I can't go outside. You know, luckily we invented these things called winter jackets, and you can go outside when it's a little bit colder. Like we have things to do this. And so getting outside to move there's not really too many good excuses to not do that. It doesn't have to be for 3 hours a day, but, you know, 10, 15 minutes a day. How do you then like go about making sure that you get that in? Because if you don't have to be outside for something, how do you organize your day or your structure, your schedule, so that you always fit that in?
Yeah. It's exactly what you're saying. Like the answer is in the question, right? It's the structure. It's about putting it in your calendar, because if you just go about your day and you just do whatever, you'll let all of your feelings dictate what you do. And in turn, you won't get anything done. All right. Or the far majority of days, you're not going to get anything done. So if something's in your schedule, you will do it. And or at least you'll have a much higher likelihood of doing it. It's like scheduling a doctor's appointment, right? When I used to do personal training, I would say, put this in your calendar as if it's a doctor's appointment, because you're not going to go and miss it if it's a doctor's appointment. And if training and everything like that is not in your schedule, you will miss it. So it's I think the easiest thing to do to do that is to just put it in your schedule. And that's it.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it sounds sometimes like a lot of the answers to these things are so simplistic in nature. And I can't imagine, you know, the people who are listening are like, oh my God, never thought about that before. And like, that's how I feel with most fitness stuff and a lot of advice in a lot of areas, unless it's something super technical that you don't know about. But it's like, oh fuck, like, can't believe I didn't think about that. I had one of my clients that saw her last night. She was she said she was talking with a coworker about being able to buy a house or something like that. Mm-hmm. And the person said to her, like totally legitimately, not being sarcastic or trying to make a joke or anything, was like, hey, you know what really helps with being able to afford a house is saving your money. And she's like, yeah, fucking obviously. Like, yeah. What advice is that, right? But at the same time, it's like that is true. And sometimes we forget these very simple things. Like, hey, you just put in your calendar, you're more likely to get it done rather than ending up scrolling your phone or doing something else and forgetting about it or ending up that you don't have time.
Yeah. I mean, when I have too much time on my hands, I find that I'm less productive. But so if I have like nothing to do for the day, right? And I don't have anything on my schedule, then I won't get anything done because I'll get up, have a slow morning, and I could go about and all of a sudden 3 hours later, I've got nothing accomplished. But if I have a day where, let's say I don't have much to do, if I just put the gym in my schedule, if I put reach out to XYZ, if I put walk in my schedule and I block off that for an hour, I'm just much more likely to do it. So when something's structured and when something's tracked, that's what's really going to help you make progress in any single area that you want to make. You know, with buying a house, if you don't have, okay, I'm going to put this much money away this every single week or bi-weekly, then all of a sudden 1 week you're not going to do it. And then you're going to start to forget about it. And then all of a sudden you don't have any money saved if that's your goal.
Yeah, agreed. Was this something that you always sort of used? Like, how did you start to come up with, again, it's not some novel idea, but I got to imagine your life wasn't always like super structured and had everything in your calendar, like before we even had phones and all that stuff. So like, what was the transition like of that for you? And how did you kind of start to use this in your own life?
No, I was always someone that honestly, I loved having like the journals or like the calendars that look like a little notebook. Like I love those. And I would write just every single big thing that I need to do. Like you would have like the weekly tasks and I would write all my like not needs to get done today, but like, you know, this week I'd like to get it done. And then my days I used to just go through, I'll just do whatever. I'll just make sure that I get some stuff done and whatever. I'll look at the weekly tasks here and there. It just did not work for me. Like I would because it would become busy work. It wouldn't be something where I was structured. It would just be, I'm just going to be busy because we distract ourselves and we say, you know, I'm going to go and do the dishes, you know, and you feel like you're doing something productive and you are. But in terms of whether it's health and fitness or business or any of all these areas that you want to grow, you just doing the dishes isn't very helpful, right? It's just something that it feels productive. And again, that's where we're just letting our feelings dictate what we do. It makes me feel productive, but it's not actually moving the needle farther in any of these other areas. So it wasn't until one of my mentors was like, hey, you need to use Google Calendar. You need to be in this century. And I was like, all right. And then I started to just block out different things. And I was like, whoa, like things like this is way easier to go and do 4 podcasts this week because I can visually see them on the calendar versus, okay, they're just kind of like written in and I don't even like realize how much time I'm actually taking doing all these things. So it was an easy transition, but it's just about doing it. And that's it. And once you do it, then it gets a lot easier once you start doing it. That's all it is. Just taking that first little step.
Yeah, the time aspect of wasting time, and then we don't have enough time for things. We'll find, you'll do the dishes, and that only takes 10 minutes, let's say. Mm-hmm. But now you took that 10 minutes, and now you've only got 45 minutes to go to the gym instead of, 55 minutes to go to the gym. And so now that's like not enough time. You're like, oh, well, I'm not going to go now. So now you've wasted the rest of that 45 minutes. Like, it's not the 10 minutes. It's what comes after that. And this is, I think, something that I speak about often, and we spoke about this before, was like, excuse me, is just about being super aware of everything that you're doing and what you're doing. And this way you can actually then go and make changes and make the decisions that are going to like you said, move the needle forward. So it's extremely underrated.
Yep.
Now, for people that you coach, how do you start to implement these things? Because some people have, like you started with a journal and you had things written down. Some people have just like, oh, I wake up in the morning and whatever happens, and I don't know what's going on. So what are your strategies for kind of getting people on board with this?
Yeah. I think the first thing is actually seeing and realizing where we're at. Like, we need to take an audit of some sorts and look at where you're spending your time. Because if you don't even know where you're at, it's going to be hard to figure out where you're going. And so one comes after the other. Let's do that first. Then, in terms of any habit or anything that you want to change, or you want to start using a schedule, you want your time to be more productive, just pick something. And I've said this on quite a few times over and over. It's about picking something really small that almost seems stupid to not be able to achieve it. Like going for a walk, if you are not walking outside at all, right, as an example, and you say, I'm going to go and I'm going to start doing an hour walk every single day. It's really large. It's unattainable because you've been doing nothing, and now all of a sudden you're going to dedicate 7 hours every single week. So what if you just started with 2 walks a week at 5 minutes? And it seems so small, right? But in terms of building any habit or developing any type of new neural pathways so that this becomes really ingrained in what you do and who you are, pick something so small that is so achievable that you continue to do this. You continue to build more trust within yourself by keeping your word to yourself. And then in turn, then that's going to be so much easier when you want to start to implement 3 walks or 4 walks or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. Start with something super small and then make it as achievable as possible.
I love that. That's phenomenal advice, because it's so hard to fail. Part of this whole anything with fitness is like we need to set ourselves up for success. So it's, beginning of summertime now. I'm sure despite all of the, the advice and whatever out there are, thousands of people out there, millions maybe, who are like, got to get in shape for summer and trying to do these very lofty diets, very aggressive workout programs and all this stuff. And, there's a right way and a wrong way to do those things. And maybe that's a little bit separate. But what I'm getting at is that you're setting goals that are way too high. And then there's a reason why you can only do it for a couple of weeks, and then you can't do it for forever. And then every single summer comes around and you've got to do this again. And it's like, hey, if you keep doing the same, if you keep needing to do the same thing, then it's obviously not working. So why don't we try a different approach? Like, let's start with something and make it a habit. And the way to make it a habit is so that it's outside of what you're doing, but not outside of what's possible. And I think that is a big differentiator to start to understand like what you're actually capable of. Now, on the note of kind of going on the other side, have you ever done things like that where you've like done something a little bit more extreme or done something a little bit more aggressive? And if you can remember, like, why did you do it and kind of what did you learn from those things?
Yeah. So for me, I lost over 25 pounds from my junior year of high school to my senior year of high school. So within about 3 months, right? 25 pounds in 3 months, depending on the person, depending on their body weight. I was probably about 230 and I went down to 190, even down to like close to 180 at one point. And that's where it's super extreme, because it wasn't something that's attainable. One, I was really young, right? I'm 16. I'm a guy. It's going to be a lot easier for me at that age, super active, to go and drop that 25, 30 pounds. So in terms of like starting to build healthy habits and everything, I wasn't starting to build healthy habits. I was just eating a lot of meat and fruit and exercising a whole lot, doing 2-a-days, 3-a-days at the gym and with football and all these different things. That wasn't something that's sustainable, because I couldn't do that right now. I can go and work out 3 times every single day and just eat meat and fruit. Like, I don't have a huge desire to do that. So with something like that, you need to look at, again, where was I at that stage of my life? Okay, it's easy for me to go and do that then, but if I was to go and try to implement a strategy like that now, and back then it wasn't a strategy, someone just took me under their wing, and it was, let's go, let's do as much as we can. But now I can't go, or I can't tell someone. Like, imagine going and signing up with a fitness or a health and nutrition coach, and then being like, all right, we need to work out 3 times a day, and we only need to eat these 3 small meals, and then you will drop 20 pounds in the next month. They might be excited by hearing 20 pounds in the next month, but as soon as they start doing this, after the first day, they're going to be like, this is miserable.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your initial question was. Something to do with something unsustainable, and that's my experience with it.
Yeah, no, I forget the crux of my original question as well, but I think this brings us into another better point, is something that you've talked about before, and it is belief in the system or the coach or the thing that you're trying to use, the strategy that you're trying to implement. And so the example that you just gave, coach says, hey, you need to work out 3 days a week. You need to eat, only chicken and broccoli and blueberries for, 3 meals a day. And that's it. And you got to do this for a month, and you're going to lose 25 pounds. And you hear that and you're like, fucking yeah, sign me up. Like, I can do that. Like 25 pounds in a month. Like, I can, like, let's go. If you believe enough in that system, there's a chance that you'll be able to stick through it. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't make it a good idea or necessarily a bad idea, but it just means that you're able to stick through it. So how do you then marry this idea of like, hey, we need to kind of give people lofty goals so that they can kind of buy in and feel like excited and motivated by it, but also make it realistic so that it's not 3 workouts a day and, chicken and blueberries for 3 months?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because one, I'm huge on believing in what you're actually doing, right? And so with myself, it can't just be, for me anyway, a lot of people will use this where it's, hey, you need to track every single calorie, and that's it. That's all we need to do. This is 2,200 calories is your thing, and just go do it, right? And if you don't do it, then whatever, you suck. And so with this, you need to meet people where they're at, and you need to set realistic expectations for each of you, right? So bridging the gap between these big lofty goals and what's realistic is, again, we're going to go back to where are you at now. And so let's look at where you're at now. Take that, and now how can we start to implement small things? Because yes, of course, we want to look at this 6-month, 12-month horizon. This is where we want to get you to. But at the same time, like, we just need to change a small couple of things right now. And let's focus on who we can become. Let's focus on what we're going to be able to do and what that type of person does, and less about the external result. And then when we can detach from that just a little bit, it's going to be easier to stick to our new routine this week. It's going to be easier to go and implement new healthy habits next week. And now, over the next 3 months, a lot has changed. You feel a lot better. But it's not something where we were just, hey, we need to make sure that we lose 20 pounds in this next month. We're getting away from a lot of the external things and just, okay, how can we become better? How can internally we become better? Let's focus on those things, who we're going to be, what we can control. Everything else will iron itself out.
Something you said there that I want to really zero in on is figuring out what kind of person you want to be and what that kind of person does. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because that's a huge identity shift. People say, I want to be fit, or maybe, I'm not the gym person. I'm not the diet person. I'm not a runner. I'm not a weightlifter. But you want the results of someone who does those things. So how do you, create that identity shift?
So with truly changing your identity, it's not, I wish I could give you this like one perspective shift or epiphany moment that's just going to change it all. Perhaps you've already gotten it listening. Perhaps you haven't. And perhaps it may never come listening to the two of us today, right? And so changing your identity is one of the most difficult things, because we look at all of these different stories that we tell ourselves, right? I'm not a runner. I'm not good enough, I'm overweight, I'm insert whatever you want to say about yourself. And it's just this story that you've created about yourself. And the thing is, since you created it, you can go and create something else. It's just that this version of you've been operating at for such a long time. Perhaps you've just convinced yourself that this is really who you are. And that's all it is. You've just convinced yourself that this is who you are. And so now you just have to convince yourself that you're someone else, right? It sounds easy, right? Because we all know what we should do in terms of eating healthy and exercising for the most part. All right, move a little bit more, eat a little bit less, eat some fruits and vegetables, things like that, right? And so why don't we do it? Well, we haven't even attached, we just look at it as another diet, as opposed to, okay, you know what? I'm a healthy person. And so a healthy person eats these things, and I eat these things because I'm a healthy person because I want to feel good. And so having that little perspective shift, it's going to come in different ways for everyone, right? It's probably not going to be while you're searching, like scrolling through social media. It might be when you're in the shower or when you're taking a drive late at night. That might be those different epiphany moments that you need for an identity shift, right? So the best way to go and start to do something like this, because I hope to give people actionable steps, go and just write down just at night, like how you feel, right? Sounds simple, sounds easy, sounds kind of woo-woo, sounds kind of dumb, right? But you just getting your thoughts onto paper, all right, that's going to be one of the most helpful exercises that you can start to do, in my personal opinion, and then go from there.
One of the other things that I think is extremely powerful about this is that it shifts this from a negative change in your life or a negatively motivated change where it's like, hey, I'm going to the gym, I'm eating healthy because I need to lose weight, because I don't like the way I feel, because I don't like this or that, or my clothes don't fit or whatever, like all these negative things. Versus now you're just saying, hey, I'm going to, choose these healthy foods or go to the gym and exercise and whatever, because that's just what I do. Because I'm a healthy person, and that's what healthy people do, and that's what normal people do. I think there's also a whole other conversation to be had about like labeling things as healthy lifestyle versus that should just be the normal lifestyle, and anything not healthy is like the abnormal and labeled differently. But separate to that, it's making things a positive shift, and you do this because that's just what you do, not because you're trying to punish yourself for the weight that you've gained or for for whatever reason. Like, it's not your fault that you're in this situation, but I think it is your fault that you need to change it from here, right? Mm-hmm. You're talking about the story that we've told ourselves. Mm-hmm. You're the result of that story currently, but the great part is you also get to write the next page, and that means you can write something different and start to change the story to whatever it is that you want to be. What were some of your, or who were your, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to piggyback off that just for a moment, but you go ahead.
No, go ahead, because I just wanted to ask a different question.
I lost my thought. So as soon as we spoke at the same time, like that's the difficulty
of remote podcasts. Like, even though we can see each other and we're on video, it's still not the same as sitting in a room with someone. Have you got a chance to do like some in-person podcasts on your show?
Yeah, so I've done about 10 total.
Yeah.
And it's a lot different. I love them a lot more. But there's more setup, there's more editing, there's more higher quality microphones. There's a lot that unfortunately goes into it, Yeah. And so I'd love to start doing more. Right now with my schedule and everything, I put them off. I'd rather just do interviews on Zoom or whatever and go from there.
Yeah, the logistics as well. It's just like then you can only get people who are in and around your city. Like a 1 hour podcast, takes 1 hour versus if you've got if someone has to come in, that's like half a day for them or for you if you've got to travel to them. And, I don't think either of us are in positions to be, flying people out and have a sick studio and all that stuff. So it's a whole other ballgame, another level of things, but getting detracted from the point is, and I think that we'll probably have a lot of similarities because we're both podcast people, is who are some of your mentors? You mentioned a mentor before, but what were some of your things that you learned from and people you learned from and ideas that you stole from or borrowed from? What were some of those things that people can maybe tap into or find other inspiration in?
Yeah. So for me, I've got a couple of different people that I've laid out, right? Almost like my Mount Rushmore of people that I can look up to. But at the same time, like, you don't want to be someone that's going to agree with everything that they're saying. Mm-hmm. I think that it's important, especially when you're looking for inspiration or a mentor or any of these different things. You can look at all of the things that they've done and how you want their life or XYZ. But at the same time, you need to go and make sure that you can look at all of these things, but use your own discernment to create your own belief system. It's not just that you take everything that they say and all of a sudden, like, that's who you are, that's what you do. No, like, take what resonates, discard what doesn't here. One of my mentors, his name is David Waldy. He's amazing dude, a business, I don't even know what I would call him. I don't know. His emotional intelligence is like level 10 million. Like, it's crazy. And his business knowledge is like, it's insane as well. So, but growing up, I would say it's tough. I have not looked up to a ton of people. Him, Kobe Bryant, I really love. I love Greg Plitt. And he was an old bodybuilder. And other than that, I don't have like a ton of people that I'm like, ooh, I need their life. You know, I'm just nitpicking a little bit of like, hey, that sounds really good. Let me go and try to use that. Hey, that sounds really good. I'm going to go and implement that. And then that's it. So people look up to mentors. I think it's always important. And it's always like, especially as like people that podcast, right? We're podcasters here. I think it's important to go and talk to people that you agree with and talk to people that you don't agree with. I think that's like what's helped me the most, less about the mentorship, more putting myself face to face with people that I don't agree with. That's one of the biggest things.
It's completely ridiculous to think that any one person knows everything about everything, and that everything that you know is like the right way.
Yep.
You know, that to think that, hey, maybe there's someone else out there who has a different perspective or a different way to do this or a different way to think about this problem or a different method of, you know, solving this issue, whatever the case is. And the second you think that like you've got it all, like you're screwed for sure. But I agree with you. There's no one that I would say either. And for anyone, I'd think that you'd say, hey, like, I want their life. I think if everyone in the world, you know, threw their problems in a bucket and you get the chance to go and pick out someone else's problems, like you'd take your own problems back. Yeah. Maybe there's some exceptions, some, you know, way worse parts of the world, but like, you know, more or less equal, you know, place in the world, you would take your own problems back. Everyone's got, you know, just because people have lots of money and maybe lots of influence and, you know, lots of views and lots of, you know, whatever, like, doesn't mean everything is great behind the scenes or in the stuff that you don't see. Like, there's no way you'll know everything about someone else's life. And so I think that's why it's so important to take that Bruce Lee approach of, you know, take what's useful, discard what's not, and, you know, make it uniquely your own. I kind of butchered that quote, but that's the essence of it. Yeah, it's important to learn from different people. How do you then go about seeking out, if there's any way that you do this outside of the podcast, seeking out people whose opinions maybe you differ with, or challenging your own thought patterns or ideas? How do you go about, you know, implementing that in your life?
Yep. The more difficult questions that you can ask people, the more that you will start to understand and disagree with people. And at the same time, I'm curious of why people think that way, right? And so in terms of implementing it, it's not like I'm going up to random strangers and just being like, so tell me about your life, right? But different conversations, the more that you can go and network and the more that you can go and just have conversations with people, the better, right? So besides the podcast, the podcast is the biggest one because people are giving me an hour of their time. When is the last time, unless you're living with your significant other, that you had an hour uninterrupted without your phone to sit there and talk to someone? Probably not very recently, right?
Yeah.
And even when you go out to dinner with your significant other, I still see people chilling on their phone, things like that. We're also distracted, right? And so in terms of me actively putting myself out there, like, people that I work with, right? I disagree with a lot of them, which is awesome. I love it. Not to the point where I'm like going and actively seeking out some type of confrontation, but I'm interested to know why you believe this on XYZ, and this is my point. Cool. Now I've seen both of them, and then now I can go and make my own like decision about them. So people that you work with, I think, is a great place. Even just people like reaching out to more people that are you're friendly with or that you've been friends with in the past. Just probably once a week I go and reach out to someone where, hey, I haven't seen you in a little while, thinking of you, hope everything's good. A lot of the times I end up calling them and we'll get on like a 20-minute conversation, 30-minute conversation, and it's just about whatever. And so it's not like I'm actively going out and seeking disagreements with people, but the more questions that you can ask people, the more you'll find out. So just ask people more questions.
I think the art of having a conversation is also being a little bit lost. I mean, this is extremely highlighted online where like you can't have a debate about something in the comment section of a post. Neither person is willing to change their mind, and it degrades very quickly to name calling rather than like talking about the idea. You know, and then it's like, well, this is pointless. We're just like toddlers, you know, toddlers maybe can even argue better than that. And so it's not about arguing, but it's about having a proper discussion. And you can disagree with someone. Like I have disagreements with friends all the time about various topics, not fitness related, other things. And it's not an argument. It's just a discussion. This is my point and that's your point, and it's okay to disagree. I still like you. I don't not like you because we disagree on some random issue that's not really that important to either of our lives. But you know, it's a way. You just have to have, I think, creating opportunities to have conversations with people. Like you said, it's very rare, even with your significant other. A lot of people, you know, you'll come home and it's busy talk. How was your day? What's going on? The kids are doing this. That's going. You know, it's that stuff. It's not sitting down at the table and just like having a conversation about like, what's up? What are you doing? Like talking to a random friend and just catching up, right? So I think again, and I almost hate to keep always highlighting this, but like it comes back to just like this structure of your life. If you don't build these things in, it's not going to happen. Certainly not in today's world. Maybe years and years ago, it used to just be like a more normal occurrence, but it's just not going to happen. Although I don't think that structure means necessarily rigidity and boring and not a chance for adventure and randomness, if you will, but it allows those things to actually be to flourish a little bit more, I think. And so you kind of can build that in to a degree as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think structure is, again, like what you're talking about, is one of the most important things, right? And so you can use the example of someone that we've got a couple here, right? And a metric and like part of this structure is, all right, well, did we go out for date night this week, or do we have it planned, or like maybe it's once a month, right? And if you're not even incorporating that and measuring that, because if you're not measuring it, then again, you're just dictating it off your feelings, right? And then it's not going to happen. So it's not that this date night needs to be every single Friday. We go out at 7, we go out to the same restaurant, we both order the same food, right? People think that that with structure, well, you're going to have a really boring life. Well, I think the majority of us have pretty boring lives, right? And that's just like the a little bit of the way it is, in terms of I love my life. I think it's really fun, right? But if I was to just go and someone was to insert themselves into my life, they'd be like, oh, like this is it, you know? But like I think it's fun. And you can go and say the same thing about yours or someone else's, but with this structure, that creates the freedom that you're going to want, or that creates the freedom that you're looking for. It's not that freedom creates discipline, it's that discipline is going to create freedom. And so having that discipline and that structure is going to help you create that freedom and have more time for that adventure that you're seeking.
This also comes back to another thing that I've seen you speak about before, and that I wanted to bring up today, and it's about being selfish about your own goals. And so in the example that you just said, The things that you do, if someone else was inserted into your life, they may be like, well, what the fuck is this? Like, what are we doing here? Right. And I think that would probably be the case. Like, that's probably true for anyone. I'm sure it'll be true for me. I'm sure it'll be true for anyone. You insert yourself into someone else's life. You're like, why do they do the things that they do? Like, this is not fun or cool or interesting or whatever, but it's interesting to them. Now, having said that, when you do have a goal that you're chasing, especially a fitness goal, where it's like you're making this big identity shift, you're changing your structure. Like, hey, Joe never used to go outside and walk, and all of a sudden he's like walking around the neighborhood, and he never used to go to the gym, and now he's going to the gym, and he doesn't have time to like, come out to the bar on Wednesdays or watch the hockey game or whatever it is. That's a big shift, but you're doing this for yourself. And so how do you then, you've got to be selfish but not ruin your relationships and whatever. So can you talk about this concept of being selfish and how to start to implement that, and how to wrap your head around being okay being selfish in pursuit of what you want?
Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at this feeling of feeling selfish, right? We only feel selfish because we believe that it's going to take away from someone else. That's one of the biggest reasons that we feel selfish. And so I would want to just figure out some type of layout where, one, you're going to write down your goals, right? You're going to write down who you want to be. And when you have that, that's going to be easier to go and base that off of becoming this selfish season of life that you might entail. Because the majority of people don't have their goals written down. They don't have the life that they want. They don't have a real true vision of it. They don't write down what they want their body to look like. They just know that what they have now isn't what they want. That's it. They just know what they don't want. They don't actually know what they want. And so when you're looking at being selfish, right, there's always that one metaphor, whatever you want to call it, of you can't pour from an empty cup, right? And so when you're looking at this, one, can you go and have a conversation with your wife? These are the things that I want to do. Okay. This is how I'm going to make it so that I don't, so that I'm still in our relationship and I still give you the time that you're looking for. But hey, after work, I'm going to go and spend an hour at the gym. That's one less hour that we have together. But instead, we're going to go and we're going to structure this date night in, or we're going to go and make sure that for 30 minutes, we go and chat before bed, right? People think that just because you are selfish and you're like actually have goals, right? Everyone should just, I'm not saying that how should I word this? It's not that everyone's going to support you, right? So find the people that are going to support you, stick with them, and screw everybody else, right? And when I say screw everybody else, awesome. You're not with me on this mission. I still love you, but let's do it from a distance here. That's all. I don't need to go and say, oh, you don't support me, like, screw you. Like, no, like, why would that person have so much emotional control over me? That's silly to me.
I think those people who would say that, it's also worth examining why they might say that. Mm-hmm. Because to say that you're like, hey, I'm going to eat healthy and like go to the gym and make these positive changes in my life, like I don't think anyone in any sense would say like, hey, that's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. If you started telling someone like, hey, I'm actually thinking of quitting my job and like starting to do drugs, then people would be like, hey, man, like probably not a good idea, right? Yeah. But if you're saying I'm going to make all these positive changes and someone is being negative about that towards you, like, oh, you're being that guy now, you're not coming out and whatever, you have to examine what it is. And I think a lot of it is going to come from jealousy because, like you said way earlier, we all know the things that we should be doing. Mm-hmm. We all know that we should be eating healthier, moving a little bit more, exercising, blah, blah. And if someone sees you doing that and they know that they should be doing it and they're like, oh, but, it's different for me. I can't. And I'm jealous of Joe because he's doing the thing again. And, I think you have to understand where that comes from and kind of like let it be. But then also the best way to get that person on board is to be selfish, do the thing that you're going to do and lead by example. And I think there's a good chance that they'll end up kind of following you along that because they're looking for that leader, that guidance to go through it because everyone wants to do this. This is not a negative change in anyone's life.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you're looking at like being the leader, setting this example for people, right? Whoever you want to be, you just have to be that living embodiment of that right now. And if you like, that's a difficult concept for people at times. But if you can look at exactly what you want, exactly who you want to be, and you be them today the best that you can, then that version of you that you're looking to become will get closer and closer and closer. And that's it. Like, there could be some big, huge, crazy answer that I give you, right? But it's that simple. It's just hard.
This is also why third-party accountability friends or partners are very valuable early on, I think, in people's fitness transformation, if you will, because it's really easy to, blow off your wife or your buddy or your mom or, whoever, your friends who are like, you don't really feel that bad if they're expecting you to get to the gym and you don't go. But if your coach is trying to, expecting you to be there, even if you're part of these, like, any online accountability communities, Facebook groups and Discord groups and things like this where people are kind of expecting you, like, it's way easier to be accountable to someone who, like, you feel like you can't blow off than it is to be accountable to someone who genuinely loves you and cares about you and does want the best for you. But for whatever reason, they have their own mental blocks about what you should be or how you should be or what you should be doing or how it benefits them selfishly. Like, everyone is kind of being selfish. And so you have to, pull on your own selfish muscle to actually implement the things that you want to employ. But this is why I think accountability is so huge, and early on, like, an external accountability partner is a huge benefit for almost everyone.
Yeah. A couple things to touch on there, especially with, like, this topic of accountability and structure, I think that they just go hand in hand. And a lot of people, if they just had structure and accountability, they would be able to reach the goal that they're trying to reach, right? But when you don't have any structure, you're just going about it throughout your day, just randomness per se. Oh, well, I eat pretty healthy, right? That's the answer that the majority of people, regardless of what you look like, if I said, what do you eat during the day? They say, well, I eat pretty healthy. Yeah. And that's every single person that you will ever meet, right? And so, but there's no structure to it, because it could be, hey, you know what? I had an omelet for breakfast, and I'm just making up arbitrary meal plan here, right? But I had an omelet for breakfast with some fruit. I had a chicken sandwich for lunch, and then for dinner, we had salmon and some veggies, right? But then the weekend comes, and all of a sudden, all right, well, I went out for lunch, I went out for dinner, brunch the next day, all these different things, right? But I eat pretty healthy though, right? So there's no structure, okay? There's going out to eat 3-4 times a weekend, and then there's, hey, on Saturday night, we have a planned, like, with intention meal out. And then so if you just had that structure, and then you had the accountability, someone not holding your hand, but saying, hey, this is what you said you were going to do. Why didn't you do it? Right? If you have someone that's with you there, then as long as you have those two things, more or less, it's inevitable to go and reach the goal that you're trying to reach.
It causes truth to smack you in the face. Like you said, everyone eats pretty healthy. And yet, you're by their own definition and their own sentiment, I'm overweight, I don't feel great, whatever. It's like, okay, hold on a second. If you ate as healthy as you say that you do, then you wouldn't be in this situation. And that's not a judgment. That's just reality. And sometimes that truth and that judgment, it's hard to face, and it hurts and it stings right, deep inside you. But this is the reality that we need to face. Because if you were doing the things that you said you were doing, you wouldn't be in the situation that you're in. And so if we can just marry those things, if we can make what we're doing, the things that we think that we're doing, then we're going to have good results. And that's where this, like, this stark awareness kind of comes in. And then we can build the structure around it. Like, okay, what am I actually doing? Then how do I do the things that I should be doing? And then, like magic, you'll get results and get where you need to be.
Yeah. And I think it's that simple. A lot of us, just what happens is we say that we're going to do one thing, we don't do it, then we have these feelings of shame and guilt, and then we don't do it again because we feel all of just what I'm saying, these feelings of shame and guilt, and then that's what creates that pattern of not doing it. We don't do it, we feel bad about it, and then we don't do it again because we feel bad. And so the biggest thing in terms of like actually starting to implement and build habits and all of these different things, going back to creating the smallest goal that you can do, doing it, and then like creating something that you know that you are going to stick to, right? It's the example of go and do one push-up. One push-up is not really going to do much for you, right? But if you just go and do it, and you said that you were going to do it, and then celebrate that small win that you just had, now continue to stack up small wins, build some momentum, and it's going to be much easier to start to implement all of these healthy habits that you're looking to have.
In true fellow podcaster form, you've done a great job of bringing this back full circle as we as the time comes to wrap it up. I know you've got to go, but that's a perfect example, right? Positive cascading events, massively effective, the same way that negatively cascading events are massively ineffective and detrimental. So thanks for bringing that full circle, man. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that you feel like that we didn't get to today?
No, I think what's important is when people listen to a podcast like this, you're most likely doing something else at the same time, right? You're driving or you're walking. You're most likely not just laying on your bed listening to the two of us right now. So my biggest piece of advice for people, no matter what they do when they listen to a podcast, go and find the one actionable step that you can take and do that. And that's it. So if I was to leave someone with something, that's what I'd like to leave them with.
Beautiful, man. That's great. And the beauty is that that one little actionable step is going to be different for everyone. Like people are going to take things differently and in different contexts of their own life. And so it's, there's definitely something for everyone. But yeah, man, thank you so much for being here, for your time and for sharing with us. My voice is horrible today. So sorry for that. But where can people find you? Where can they plug into everything that you got going on?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So everywhere that I am, you can just find it by going to Growth by Shawn. So Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all those types of things. And then to work with me, just shoot me a message, or I have a coaching application in my Instagram bio, Facebook, things like that. So regardless, anything Growth by Shawn, including my own podcast, is the Growth by Shawn podcast. So type that in somewhere and you'll find me.
Awesome. I will link that in the show notes, but Growth by Shawn on all the socials, and the Growth by Shawn podcast, which is another phenomenal podcast that you should definitely be checking out. So Shawn, thanks very much, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone for listening. Hopefully you will find an actionable tip, and more importantly, take action on it and actually do something and change your life.
Yep.
So thank you for listening. Make sure that you're following us both. Like, share, subscribe to the podcast, all those good things. We appreciate you. Go outside, be a good person. See you next time.